Stephen. Stephen, thank you again for giving us a chance to interview you. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about your background up until where you started your career, it would be really appreciated.
Absolutely, I appreciate the kind introduction. Thank you very much. It's a joy to be here and join this conversation. Just really dive into it. So, who is Steven? I think I've just been saying I'm me. I think especially after I left, my role at the Toronto Academy, which is where most individuals know me from, is for 6 years. I served as a member of the Toronto Cabinet, 4 years as executive director. Finished my tenure back in April, which we'll get into. Who else? I'm a twin, born and raised here in the city of Toronto. As well as what else about me? I like my rest thing, like things I do to rest is really just binge watching, crime and action movies. Like people think I like do a whole routine. It's just really like for as long as I can get one or two crime shows in a day, like I'm at peace in life. So I'm really excited to dive in and have a conversation today.
That's awesome. That's so funny. I'm glad you say that. There's some things we just need to be able to feel peace. We can pray, which is great, but sometimes we need some of these indulgent things. So I'm glad you say that. And it's so funny that you have a twin. I bet he gets bothered all the time asking
I,
you.
I I think we both share the botherness of, folks either confusing me for him or asking me about him and vice versa for sure.
That's so funny. Well, we look forward to meeting him too. Hope he can join us and then we can see how similar you guys are. But maybe you can take us back a little bit. Can you let us know a little bit about your experience growing up? How was the young Stephen and what brought him towards this career now? When did this interest in being an advocate and politics start to pop up? Can you share your experience here and in Ghana?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with so I was born here. I left to go to Ghana in grade eight, not because I was bad, but because
Okay.
I always have to put that disclaimer, but because my parents wanted me to do better in school, is the reason, and myself and family, and so left grade eight, went to Ghana for about 3 years. Great experience, like looking back, I never regret it. And during my time in Ghana, like beyond getting closer to my culture, beyond getting closer to my relationship with Christ. Like I think it also was the time that built my leadership skills. And I'm sure folks who are familiar, like or maybe were born there, did school there, know about the leadership role called prefect. So you have so I was it's kind of like a student council. If I were to mirror it here, it's kind of like a student council where you have your president, vice president. I was not the boys prefect. Almost, but I was the sanitation prefect, like a part of the team. And I think getting that first time leadership opportunity, being responsible for the health and safety of the school, the part of the school I went to, like I think that really instilled a lot more confidence and boldness in me. That oh wow, maybe I can do this, and that role was elected. It wasn't appointed by the headmaster or anything. Like we went through an actual election process, and thankfully I was able to succeed in that. So after I came back from Ghana to Canada, roughly grade 10, 11, that was like I didn't come back and immediately go into student leadership or any type of leadership. Like I really came back and was trying to not get reacclimated because I was already familiar
Mhm.
with the system, and so I got reacclimated for a bit. But then I always touch on an experience I had, my brother and I, where we almost not almost, yeah, we almost face a harmful practice called streaming, and this is we'll talk into this afterwards, where we talk about anti-black racism. Long story short, they were trying to move my brother and I into classes that were lower than our academic abilities. That's something that they usually do to Black individuals, those who either come from abroad or even those who are just here coming in from high elementary school. And so I think that was the first experience I had coming back of injustice off rip. I always tell folks when I was coming back from Ghana, I thought it was gonna be a whole welcome, like Steven, you're back, it's amazing, it's beautiful. Next thing you know, it's just like, no, I got a hard reckoning of, what is it like to be a young Black person here in the city of Toronto. And so um after that experience, I got involved was volunteering in my community, got involved in my local youth space and other initiatives in my community, and eventually through that time I heard about the Toronto Youth Cabinet, and that was my real first experience of advocacy, not community work, but it was my real first political experience of advocacy. And then the story goes on from there, which I know we'll touch on in a bit. So I'd say really credit my Ghana experience and the leadership roles I was able to get in Ghana. And although I didn't immediately follow that when I came back to Canada, I still had that instilled in me, and the confidence that was instilled in me by my teachers and peers in Ghana carried me through here in Canada. And thankfully, I had good mentors and youth workers who also helped to even further build that confidence in me too.
That's awesome. It's amazing being able to go back home, embrace your culture, learn more about your culture, and not just lay low, but be elected to be able to represent your people, your classmates. That's amazing. So I'm glad you had that opportunity. And I'm just wondering, when you came back, you started school and you started to decide on what major or what school you would apply for. What brought your interest to Ryerson? And you were supporting at U of T as well, right? So what made you choose criminology? What was kind of in your mind when choosing your career?
Yeah, so like after, so coming back, finished high school, like I think like I always say like since grade 8, I've always known I wanted to be a lawyer. Like I found like I still have a lot of my elementary school stuff here. And so like I was reading some and it's like I still said I wanted to be a lawyer at the end of my elementary school life. And so the goal was always to be a criminal lawyer. And so criminology was naturally gonna be something I studied in school just because it was of huge interest to me. But I think, you know, right when I was entering post-secondary, like I said, I had already slowly dipped my toes into the politics pieces, and I'm like, okay, this seems more interesting. It's still pretty new to me, but it still seems interesting enough and something that I would want to get more into and learn more about. And so, my first year at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, I was just a criminology major, but thankfully the second year, TMU had created a program that was a double major program for criminology and politics. So that's the thing, like I couldn't even apply for both until like second year. And so eventually took criminology and politics at TMU, finished that, thankfully, and really enjoyed it to be honest. Like obviously it's more difficult when you're taking a double major because you have
Mhm.
less luxury of the courses you take, but it was still something that like was meaningful to me because it was both within my passions of crim and politics.
That's amazing. And were you volunteering and doing student groups while you were going to school? I'm sorry, I'm going to say Ryerson because I went there as well when it was called Ryerson, and so it's still
No
stuck in my head.
problem.
So
I
apologize for that.
So no, I wasn't like I always say like my community or social activism and whatnot like was never in school. Like it was always in community. So I was doing a lot of volunteering beforehand. Like I supported my former local MPP in his first election campaign. Thankfully he won to serve my ride in here. I also was volunteering for like I remember the time right before I joined Toronto Youth Cabinet, which was like 2019-ish. Like I had volunteered for 3 consecutive campaigns. So it was
Wow.
first, I think, federal, then provincial, then municipal, like back to back to back. So like never again. And
That's a lot of energy.
and it was a lot,
Absolutely.
but I think it was very like a meaningful experience because I think that allowed me to not just connect with my neighbors and community members, but also really broaden my, I guess, horizons, but it's broadened my
Mhm.
mindset. Like, what are the issues not just people who look like me are facing, but people who
Mhm.
don't, but also understanding those common and shared challenges too. So that was
Mhm.
my first experience of political volunteerism, and then afterwards leaving that partisanship life to go join like the city work.
That's awesome. Can you share a little bit about some of those common and uncommon experiences that you can remember that people face?
I think like honestly, and it's unfortunate because most of the time, like most of the issues, and I've always said this, most of the issues you hear like decades ago are the same now. Like we've not really addressed these things as a society as we should
Mhm.
have. But I think ones that really do stick out are seniors. I think part of my volunteering that I've done was I used to volunteer at my local healthcare center. It's a long-term care center where just supported seniors and folks with physical disabilities and whatnot. And so I think most of the doors we knocked on, not most, but like at least the time I was knocking on doors, like seniors were home at that time, and people, I guess, other people were, working whatnot, and you'd hear a lot of the challenges of seniors, be it accessibility challenges,
Mhm.
or transportation, like how to get around, but also like the other things I said about safety. This is forever is going to be an issue, unfortunately, as well as just the unaffordability. Like I think people are always complaining about, rightfully so, about how unaffordable it was. I mean, folks were complaining then, but imagine now with how
Mhm.
worse it's gotten, unfortunately. But I think those are some of the high level things I remember. But I think also remembering, and it ties into the youth piece, like the common messaging of residents trying to see what is out there for their children and youth, what programs out there, be it swimming, camp programs, like things that their young people can access. And we know so often that, like as the years have went by, those same programs have basically are non-existent now.
Oh,
It's hard to get access to affordable swimming camps or just camps and after school programs and things of that sort. So those were some of the challenges I remember back then, which unfortunately are still persistent now.
I hear you. That is a shame. One thing I'm grateful for with Canada is that there is a little bit of effort with the government putting our taxes towards these programs. I'm grateful for the library. I've always been happy that they offer
Yeah.
some free programs and then community centers too, swimming for $3. But I know that those type of lessons that we need for safety and for leisure are essential and could definitely be more affordable, and especially with seniors too, with our aging population.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we'll be able to address that soon. Were you able to help with those programs when you were able to transition to the mayor's office? And your was kind of your official first role?
So and so like I was first part of the Toronto cabinet, then joining the mayor's office. Like I didn't join the mayor's office first, then went to the Toronto cabinet. Like
Okay.
so basically my role at the Toronto cabinet, first I was the education lead responsible for the education file for 2 years, and then I became ED and I served in that role for 4 years. But when I had joined the mayor's office, I had finished like 1 year into my executive director role.
Oh, okay.
And so it was difficult for everyone at City Hall then because it's like he's wearing two hats. Like he's in a role
Oh,
that's meant to basically criticize the mayor and the city. But he's also working for the mayor and the city. And so I think I remember that like it was like a 5, 6 month internship that I was able to get. And really happy about that. Like it was a matching thing. So I had I had wanted the mayor's office, and the mayor's office had given the organization a list of criteria that they wanted, and thankfully we both wanted each other basically, and I was
that's
able to
amazing.
do that job for about 6 months, and really it was a great learning opportunity. But like I said, very difficult to manage the hats of, I
Yeah.
mean, I think I had to, no, I didn't take a leave of absence for my Toronto Cabin role. Probably should have, but I definitely,
I know you're passionate. Yeah.
was not as vocal. I think over those couple of months, but I
Mhm.
think I did do a lot of internal advocacy because you work in the mayor's office, and so your positionality is different. And I was able to definitely, like to your question, see how we can get more supports, not just for youth programming and community supports, but also that seniors piece. Like I think I look back at my experiences as much as I've done a lot for youth. I also have a tremendous interest for like seniors and the Asian population. And I think we so oftentimes hear this notion of if you build a city or community that is good for an 8-year old and an 80-year old, that's like a perfect city, perfect community
Mhm.
because 8-year olds are very vulnerable, 80-year-olds are very vulnerable. And so if we're able to address those two groups' unique needs, everyone else in between is going to benefit. So I think my like work with children and youth and out of seniors, which who are obviously the most vulnerable in our society, has really allowed my perspective in this advocacy work to be more full.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. So when you were navigating both of these roles, and then when you were able to just focus on one, what was it like going through your expectations or what was expected of you, and then what you also had on your agenda? How did you balance that, and what did that look like for you?
So expectations of my Toronto cabinet role and my mayor's office
Yeah,
role.
your Toronto Youth Cabinet role.
But I was just able to focus on that. I think like ultimately it was never like be beyond me the responsibility that I had, which was like in my role, like we were created by Toronto City Council to advocate on behalf of Toronto's over 600,000 youth. And so like I think that was something that I did not take for granted, especially being in a role that was very public. Everyone knew I was the one responsible. So it was like every single issue someone had is like, see what are you doing about this? See what are you doing about that? Like it's like there's so many issues to do like to do work on or to do something about. But I think I never took it for granted because I'm really big on, responsibility and just obviously making a difference and service and servitude. And so I think for me, when I was in the role, beyond the expectations from young people and community members and parents about like, hey, what are we gonna do to improve the conditions of my children? Obviously, there was different expectations from a political side of things of from folks who are the mayor at the time and the current mayor and then the councilors and city staff and other stakeholders that you work with too, as to um, are we as an organization fulfilling our mandate of advocating and speaking up on behalf of young people, but are we also pushing for policies that are meaningful and that are receptive to the youth population? I think that was something that was always constant top of mind. And thankfully, I could confidently say now that I'm out of my role, we did do that. Like we were
Mm,
responsive, we were pushing issues that had an impact on young people. But I think in that moment, it's something that was constantly you constantly think about because there's thousands of issues young people have you're obviously not going to focus on 1,000 issues, but it's like what are
mhm.
those key priorities that if you address those issues, then it's going to make it easier for young people to succeed and thrive.
That's awesome. What are some of those key priorities that you pride yourself on being able to achieve? I know that you were about anti-Black racism, you were able to assist with getting premenstrual pads into schools and much more. Share with us how things started and how you were able to go about doing them.
Yeah, so my first ever initiative or file I took on was anti-Black racism, like really tackling anti-Black racism, and so thankfully we were able to push for the end of streaming. And I think I always tell to my friends back then, and now like I had like a not a vendetta, I don't want to use that word, but I was on a mission to like, hey, you guys try to stream my brother and I, even though we didn't need that, we didn't deserve that. And thankfully, if it wasn't for the advocacy of my siblings and my parents who pushed back against that, we would have been streamed. And it's crazy because my brother and I got honor roll all of our high school, career too. And so it's just like, imagine if we were streamed, we would have not reached our potential. I think we see this so oftentimes with folks who look like us as teachers and guidance counselors who belittle our children, belittle us, and tell us we're not gonna, achieve and try and reach anything. Meanwhile, if we had individuals to affirm us and empower us and support us, we could do so much more. It's great. I think one point I'll say before I answer the piece about initiatives, it's crazy to think about because the work I did in Ghana, like schooling wise, like we were ahead of folks here. Like I don't think people understand that we
Yeah,
we are ahead of you.
definitely.
And so some teachers will be like, how do you know this? Or how you getting like ace in your exams on these whatever. And it's like I learned this like a year ago, 2 years ago. So
Mhm,
it's like it's just crazy to see this, backwards colonial way of thinking and
mhm,
doing things. But that was my first initiative was anti-Black racism. We also pushed for mandatory Black history in the curriculum which ended up getting done years later. I think many of the initiatives we pushed, thankfully, we saw success. I saw success. Like, I mean, I'm not like my lifetime is very young. Like, I still have a long way to go, but I'm
mhm,
seeing them, and I was able to also see them in my role. Obviously, like you said, we pushed for free menstrual products across Ontario schools.
mhm.
Um, Really happy about that one. That one took me and I team like 8 months to do,
Oh.
like very quickly. And I always give glory to God about this because I remember one time, like it was in November, I was just there scrolling through Instagram and I saw someone post on this story, why do women have to pay for no period pads if we have a choice? I'm
Mhm.
like, that's facts. Like why? And
Love
so
that.
I that night I did a bunch of research and like on jurisdictional scans. Like I put on my policy mindset. I
Wow.
was like, okay, what are other jurisdictions doing to address this issue? And I realized like I learned more about period poverty and the inability to afford menstrual products that so many women and girls face. And starting the new year in January of that 2021 or whatnot, then I told my team like we're gonna take this on. And so I sat down as I do with all my initiatives, prayed, reflected, like asked Jesus, I'm like, hey, give me the plan to achieve this. And he gave me like it was like a four-step plan. But it's still to this day, if I were to share my screen, you would see the document. The day I created that document and the plan, I've not edited it. Like I'm not touching that because I executed every single step on that, the doc that I created my plan on. And second, we had the last step. That was when, Doug Ford's government, the Minister of Education, held a press conference saying, "We're going to do this. We're going to provide free menstrual products across Ontario schools." So,
Amazing.
to provide folks with a high-level overview of the plan, the first step of the initiative was to release a petition. So we released a petition. I always say petitions are not meant to actually like they're not the be all end all. It's just to build the hype and the momentum. And so that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was on International Women's Day. I wrote a letter, and I had all of the teacher unions sign it in Ontario, all of the four major teacher unions, as well as the Ontario Human Rights Commission and a bunch of other women leading organizations to sign it. And we really sent that over to Doug Ford and his minister. So that got a lot of media attention, which was the third phase, was like build the media attention on this issue to continue to apply pressure. Um, and the last phase involved me working with school boards across Ontario. So in Ontario, we have 72 publicly funded school boards. And so I'm like, Jesus, this is a lot. And
Yeah.
so the goal was to work with each school board and have each of them pass separate motions to send to Premier Ford saying, hey, the letter was going to say, hey, we support Stephen Mensah and the Toronto Cabinet's calls for free menstrual products across Ontario schools. So at the end, we were able to get over 50 of the 72 school boards to send letters to the premier and the Minister of Education. And by the time we got like the 50th, 52nd, then that was when like I was got like a notification like 2 days later, like, hey, we're gonna do this. And then that was like when the minister held a press conference saying, hey, we're gonna do this. So we didn't even need to get all the 72 school boards because
That's
there was so
amazing.
much pressure and momentum. And so that was the process for that. We did a lot on student nutrition, pushing forth free school meals, breakfast and lunch programs. Like my role specifically, we were able to push Premier Ford to invest an additional 20 million in student nutrition programs then. And at that point, that was about 23, 24. That marked the first increase in student nutrition programs by any government in a decade. And so similar to my other initiatives, like I sent a letter, brought all the food banks in the city and province, the country signed, not country, or the national ones in the country signed it. All the ones in Toronto signed it. We had all the teacher unions, like similar approach of bringing people together. And I think for those who've watched what I've done, like you would see that I'm very big on bringing people together. Like I don't believe in pushing for change individually. Like although like I don't think one man can do, a woman can
Yeah.
do anything. I think ultimately
Come
we
together.
can lead these things, but it's more powerful if we're doing it collectively, if we're bringing people together. And so that's something I've done in all of my initiatives is bring people together to push for change.
Wow, that's awesome. It must be a lot of energy and time to bring people together, but definitely worth it.
Yeah.
I know that you had people on your team who were working full time. Hearing that you came across a post on Instagram and that inspired you kind of inspires me, and I'm hoping inspires everyone else to use social media to advocate and to be able to come and approach. Are we able to write letters to the youth cabinet, or is there some sort of um, ask me anything question or submit a request on the website so that we can share anything that we feel is important and gather signatures?
So And before I answer that point, I think, and you said something which like just remind me of something I said in one of my previous speeches where I was like, obviously I as a man, like I don't identify as a menstruator, but that did not stop me from pushing for something that did not have any impact on me. But I think it goes back to it reinforces not just as advocates, but just as human beings. An issue shouldn't affect you directly before you speak up on it, before you
Mhm.
show up for someone and stand up for someone. And so, although I was not facing period poverty, and my immediate family wasn't facing period poverty, that doesn't mean I shouldn't be a voice and help bring people together to advocate for this issue. And I think that also resonated with a lot of people, is seeing like not just a young man, but a young black man, never mind, who's out here trying to get people to support, put in free menstrual products in schools. And so I think that was really something like one of my I it's hard to rank all my initiatives and which was my favorite, but it's
For
definitely
sure.
one of my most memorable ones. To your
Yeah.
question on kind of gonna ask me anything, like I think obviously I'm not with the Toronto Cabinet anymore,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like I think
Mhm.
our structure there was really like I'll use the expression like a door is open. It's like you send us emails, send us DMs on Instagram. Like people would reach out to us, like on all parts. They'd reach out to me on all parts, in public and so on and so forth, and given their grievances. To your point of how to mobilize, I think this is something that people don't know that you can do is with city
Mhm.
council. Like you can come out and provincially too, but it's less accessible the higher you go,
Mhm.
like city council, municipal government closest to you as a community, as a member of community, and you're able to, yeah, create a petition and get members of the community to sign it, and then councillors can put that forward as public record. You're also able to come out and give a deputation. So like you yourself can come and speak in front of the
Oh,
mayor and councillors and voice out your concerns on honestly any issue. Like obviously it depends on the item, because every meeting council and committee has a item. So if the item is on, let's say, I'll use the word, like let's say sanitation, like you can't really talk about, I mean you could talk about anti-black racism because there's but
need to be relevant.
like it needs to
Make
be
it relevant.
relevant though,
Mhm.
is the point. And so
Mhm.
I think beyond even just that, like you said, sending letters, like I don't think people realize you can communicate with elected officials, and they're meant to be responsive to you. And so whether that's coming to their community event, showing up and talking to them directly, or whether that's sending an email or asking for a meeting, like they're meant to be responsive to you. And this is not just councillors, this is also MPPs and MPs. Obviously not everyone does it, but I think the good ones and the ones who are really about their communities, they do make the time to meet with all members and hear the concerns of their constituents.
That's great. And I'm glad that you say that. Those people who are about their communities, everyone should be about their community if they're asking us
Yeah,
to vote for them. So maybe that's even something we can bring to our leaders' attention if we want them to advocate for us and bring about change.
yeah.
So that's something that many of us probably didn't know that we can request them to listen to us. We can request them to make these changes. What are some things that you realize a lot of young people or even regular citizens don't know that we should know? What are things that we can do to help bring about change or be just better citizens and more informed citizens?
Yeah, I think like beyond the point that I just articulated, like I think one piece is just, when now in society there's an issue of accurate information politically, like for
Mhm.
those who have Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, and all these other social media platforms, like it's hard to know what's the real information, like what's true and what's
Mhm.
false. And I think it really reinforces, and to that point, like how can we be more informed citizens is really taking the time to be informed, like not just looking at the first thing you see on I know our aunties and uncles like the WhatsApp and TikTok, which shocked me about
Yeah.
TikTok and all these other things. Like I think we see and hear a lot on these platforms, but it's just like not everything is accurate. And so
Mhm.
really doing that, like taking that extra step to research more, to learn more, and to, yeah, be more informed, because the last thing you want is to go off of information that's not true, that's not accurate. I think misinformation can spread so quick than the truth, and so it really forces us all as a society to really take a minute and to look more into things, right? And I think the second thing too is, so oftentimes we see this. I'll say I won't. I'll say with the black community generally. I won't specific bring it down to Ghanaian specifically because I think it's a black community issue. About we can have frustrations, we can complain about issues, but what are we doing to actually address them?
Mhm,
Like, are we coming
mhm,
out to vote? Are we bringing our voices collectively? Are we are we doing any of these organizing work to bring people together to mobilize on an issue? Like, I don't think we're doing any of those things as much as we should be as a community, and that's not helpful for us in the long term because ultimately politicians and the political class, they're only paying attention to those who come out to vote. They're only paying attention to those who look like they're organized and they
mhm,
have like large numbers, like be it the Filipino community, Indians, Somali community. Like I think it's as a Ghanaian community, it's not as if we're not large, but it's we're not unified. And I think as a Black community too, well, also there's a lack of unity too, and that causes us to not be at the table in many of these conversations, but also causes us not to be a ballot box issue. If I'm running to be a counselor, MPP or MP, what's to say I should care about Black people's issues compared to Chinese people's issues when I know who's gonna come out to vote or Italians. And so I think it's something that's so important for us as a community is to um bring ourselves together, but also turn our individual anger and frustration into real meaningful action. Because if you're
mhm,
not coming out to vote, what are you doing? Like, why are you complaining?
mhm,
Like, I really believe this. If you're not going out to
mhm,
vote, why are you complaining? It's
mhm,
like you have no right to, and I think we see this with I won't get into American politics at all because but I think nonetheless you can't complain about who ends up winning. I'll look at Canada's election. People that it was going to be the Conservatives, and I'm nonpartisan. Just for the record, I do not have any political affiliations, party wise, publicly at least. And so, but you look at it, people that Pierre Poilievre and his party was going to win, and people were frustrated that Carney's government won, or vice versa. But it's like many of those individuals did not even come out to vote. And so it's like if you did not, why are you complaining? And so I think that's something that's so important for us as a community is
mhm.
complain, but at least make sure you're organizing and you're doing the work to address the issues that you're facing.
Yeah, I think that's key. It's very important. I'm glad you said that because that was one of the questions I was going to ask. What do you think are some of the hindrances you see in our community and how we can go about changing that? And I think even if you're not some big social advocate, I think it's just important even to tell people in your household, tell
Yeah,
people at school, at work, hey, are you voting? Like,
yeah.
we can have these political conversations and we may not see eye to eye, but as long as we have a passion and we want to see a change, let's go vote. Let's talk about it.
Unequivocal. And I'm glad you said that part about because it's forget because ultimately it starts as a charity begins at home. It's like everything starts at your home. So if you and your immediate family aren't even like start with them, are you all going out to vote? If yes, then you can move on to the next step of your
Mhm,
extended family or your neighbors. And it's like I think it's making sure that those around you at least. And I know I did that over my years. Like, hey, you're not my friend if you didn't go out to vote. None of this. Oh, I'm gonna forget. Like I would like let my people know weeks in advance. Like elections are coming. I don't care whether you live in my community or not. Did you vote? Because ultimately we all have grievances and frustrations with government and with
mhm.
issues that we're facing in society. But the key to addressing that is who we put into office, and that begins by who we vote for. And so I think for me, I think it's yes, who we vote for, but it's like, are you even voting in the first place too?
Mhm.
Then we can probably talk about okay, candidates. 'Cause I think politics and voting, like, there's a lot to go. There's a lot that goes into it. But I think just the fact that you can make time to go to vote in of itself is an accomplishment.
That sounds great. And just to touch a little bit on that preparing to vote, what are some suggestions that you can give us? You said we should do some research. What should we look for? How can we make those better informed decisions?
Stick with this answer because I don't want to. I'm not trying to skew anyone. Um, I think I think it just goes back to well, one, yeah, looking at who are all your candidates running in the first place. Like I know I have friends who their go to in respects to who they're gonna vote for every election campaign is if you did not if you did not knock on my door once to canvass or like you or a volunteer, or if I did not even see at least one of your like campaign literature, like one of your like your flyers or pamphlets on my doorstep, like they're not gonna vote for you. Because for them it's like if you or your volunteers didn't even have the time or capacity to come and knock on my door, it's just like, why am I going to then make time to go vote for you when you couldn't come and see me? I don't think that's a negative route to go to, but I think yeah, I don't think that's a negative route. So I think that's one option for people to consider. But I think another option, an ideal scenario where all the candidates are coming knocking on your door, or you have at least seen all their flyers and your doorstep or whatnot. Then yeah, you sit down, look at what are the issues that you care about, but also what are the issues that are affecting your community. 'Cause I think when it comes to voting, as much as it's a personal decision, as much as it's what you're gonna do for me as Steven, it's also what you're gonna do for my community. At least that's for me and others. And I think that's a positive way of thinking about things because ultimately, especially for those who are privileged in society, they're gonna be fine either way. And so if you're able to at least remove yourself from the equation and say, okay, looking at other people who are most affected, who are most disadvantaged, and asking yourself what do they need. I think that's also a good way to make your decision as well too. Not many people do it, but I think ultimately it's also lastly about recognizing what are those shared challenges, like I said, that I might face or that I might know someone else face who's facing it. And I see that's a common challenge throughout. And so it's like, am I gonna vote for a candidate who's totally on the opposite side of that, or vote for a candidate who seems to actually be expressing an interest in addressing those challenges?
That sounds good. And I will say, maybe if they can't knock on your door, maybe they're an underdog who does have potential to bring about change. But you do bring a good point because you want to see that they're there
I
speaking up.
agree. Like, and I recognize like seeing how campaigns are like it is difficult to knock on every single door in the ride, and like it's difficult, and especially
Mhm.
for candidates who look like us. Many of these parties, they don't place candidates who look like us in areas where they can win. Like this, like truly. I was talking about this morning actually with someone. It's like you set them up for failure.
Mhm.
You put them in ride-ins where the likelihood of them winning is slim to none, and there's no resources, no funding, no nothing, and so. And look at the last federal election. I went to the party, but one of the individuals who was running, all of the candidates were black except for one, but one of them who was a black woman who was running in for one of the parties, like I knew her not personally deep, but like I knew her, like I've seen her multiple times before, and I'm like during the election period, I'm just like, who's the candidate for this party? Like, I did not see no flyers, no
Mhm.
signs on the street, no nothing. And I Googled it, and I'm like, oh wow, it's this person. I didn't vote for them, but I think it's just like my mindset was just like like, they didn't have a fair shot, and so I do agree with that mindset and that piece because which goes back to like at least even if you don't see all these candidates or the folks don't knock on your door, you yourself should make sure you're taking that extra step to Google all your candidates in the community and then making your informed decision from there.
That sounds good. And so, with what's going on in Canada with economics and with our wars with the US and all that's going on, what are some of your brief thoughts on how Canada is experiencing our challenges and hope? What hope do you have for us?
Yeah, I think obviously, I blame, or maybe I shouldn't say who I blame, but I mean, I think I've said this publicly. Like, I blame like President Trump's first term, and this is not like a knock at all. But I think, unfortunately, during the first term of President Trump, that was when politics across the world became more polarized and more divisive. I'm not saying he's a divisive figure. I'm not saying he's not. Like I think though the reality is in some of the rhetoric that we hear from politicians that he said and that we're seeing it across all parties, like even whether you're liberal, conservative, like we're seeing it across all parties. Like I think politics in Canada has become very divisive, and that stemmed from what we saw in the US, and we're also
Mhm.
seeing this in France and UK and Europe across Europe. Like but it's Germany is very violent. It's very divisive, and people are not even willing to listen to each other anymore. And so I think, it's unfortunate to see where Canadian politics has gotten to, where we're unable to have conversations with those who were not sharing the same political viewpoint of. So I think like that's one assessment of Canadian politics. But I think another piece is to your point about the wars we're seeing, the economic challenges, the Canada-US trade wars. Also, I think for me, it just asks the question, what are we doing to support those most vulnerable in community? Like, what do we? I think in all things I do, and whether it was like in my role at City Hall or advice on other members of other levels of government, is to say, and I'll use the example of the jobs. I think someone I didn't read the chat earlier, but I saw something about jobs there, and I think one thing where I heard a lot because folks know we've been pushing for the city. Well, we successfully pushed the city to create 10,000 additional jobs for young
Yeah.
people by summer 2026. So if you have a young person in Toronto, those who's 15 to 24, there'll be, God willing, an additional 10,000
That's
jobs for them
awesome.
by summer 2026. And these are not just jobs working in retail, these are jobs working in the private sector, like Google, Microsoft, Netflix. These are jobs working in community organizations. And these are jobs working for the city of Toronto too, but not just recreation jobs, jobs in the
Mhm.
different divisions. And I know while we were pushing for that the last year, one common thing I heard was like, especially the last 8 months or 7 months since President Trump has been here, is Stephen, we have to focus on the adults. Look, people losing their jobs. Wait, hey, hey. I'm just like, okay, like I don't disagree, and I agree that all members of society are going to be affected by the economic challenges, but the issue with youth unemployment is not just okay, it's youth unemployment, these kids don't have jobs. It's also these kids don't have jobs, and it's leading them to commit acts of violence and crime. Which is why in a lot of my rhetoric and messaging, I always brought up the community safety challenges. Young people are carjacking, they're robbing jewelry stores, they're invading your homes with armed robbery. They're just doing a whole lot of bad behaviors and
Yes.
criminal behavior, and that's primarily stemming from the fact that they don't have a job. I've always said that the best antidote to crime is a good job. If you give a young person a good job, a meaningful job, a gainful job, it's going to give them hope. It's going to give them purpose. It's not the only solution, but it's the key solution. While also the other things that folks have heard me push for, like more youth spaces, more funding. But I think a job is so critically important. And so I think when I look at Canadian politics, like we don't prioritize youth as a society, as a country. We don't prioritize Black youth, Indigenous youth, and we already know youth unemployment is worse for them. And so I think for me, it creates the question of for all of us community members is who are the candidates who are and what are our governments doing to really meaningfully support us, not just the performative? I know we talked about this before the call started about Sankofa Square and all those other pieces. And for those who weren't
Mhm.
here, I loved it. It was amazing. It was beautiful. No negatives about that from a cultural community standpoint. But I think from a separate standpoint of equity and improving the conditions of Black and Canadians and Ghanaian Canadians, it's like it's not going to be renaming a square that's going to do that. It's going to take investments. It's going to take real policy changes. It's going to take real action and investments to support us as a community. And so I think a lot of the things that we're seeing in Canadian politics is performative. It's
Mhm.
tokenistic. It's just trying to give you the appearance that they're doing something. Meanwhile, they're not doing anything. And so I think I saw that firsthand, doing the role at City Hall, also working with the province. Like many folks are not, if they had the opportunity to do nothing, they would do
They
nothing.
would.
Like I think that's the sad
Yeah.
truth is if
Mhm.
it wasn't for the constant pushes, they would do nothing to address the challenges that not just our children and youth face, but also we face just as Black people in the first place. So I'll leave it at that. So I think like right now, Canadian politics, it's it's not. I don't think it's going in the right direction. But I know you talked about hope. I think the one, I think the one hopeful aspect is that slowly but surely more and more folks are waking up to realize that things don't need to be this way and that they're not happy with the way things are and that they want better and that they deserve better. And I think the more people have that mindset, the more we're gonna start seeing a shift and people being lackadaisical and just frustrated and people actually taking action and voting and organizing and doing and volunteering and coming out to events to show up to really make noise about the issues that they're facing. So I think that's what gives me hope is that people are going to take this anger and use it to push for change.
That's great. I'm glad you say that because for me, growing up, I've always had pride in being Canadian and how we were more civilized and our politicians were mindful and respectful. But I've seen that switch, and I'm glad that it's not just me recognizing it, that you've recognized it too. And it does give me hope that we're realizing that this isn't how it's supposed to be. Our pockets are crying and the decisions that we're seeing being made is not what we expected. So I think change will start and knowing that it can all start by just gathering together and trying to focus on common goals is key and that's important. So for people who want to do more than volunteer and want to pursue a career like yourself, what are some suggestions that you would give?
Yeah, I think like the first is always like, what's your why? And I think I know my why. Like my why when I started this, and to this day, like it's really trying to make sure that my niece and nephews have better experiences than I did, that than my peers did, than those older than me did, and had. And so it's like really trying to make sure that they grow up in a not just an education system, but also a society where they have like I have a motto. It's on my website. It's like fighting to give youth a fair chance to
Mhm,
succeed and reach their full potential. Like I really like in all things I do, like I'm grounded by the fact that young people deserve to reach their full potential. They deserve to succeed and thrive. And I think that's been the one thing that many of us from the consultations I've done, from the time I've spent talking to seniors, talking to young people, talking to parents, is we see so many people who unfortunately haven't reached their potential, not
mhm,
because they didn't want to, but because of the circumstances around them. And I think, which is why in my advocacy, if I could, and thankfully, all glory to God, I did, push for policies, push for change, push for funding, investments, and a host of other things to slowly but surely improve the conditions of our people. I think that was a positive for me. So I think for me, it's and then one of the major advice is like, what's your why? Like, why are you getting into this? But also yeah, I mean, just really volunteer, like be it
mhm.
for your local MP, MPP, counselor. Like I think they're always looking for people to come and do stuff for free for them. But it's also a meaningful opportunity for you
Mhm,
as an individual because you get to see how like when you get to learn more about your community or the community you're gonna volunteer at, but you also get to understand and learn some of the inner workings and the frustrations and it is a unique experience to knock on doors and to go to community events and see how those things operate. I think another advice too is, I mean, there's not too many, but there are a good number of youth organizations or community organizations that do work about like civic engagement. So not just for young people, but even for those like beyond youth. Like there's organizations like well, the ones I'm thinking about primarily youth, but like there's like Democracy Exchange
mhm,
is one that's not youth oriented. There's Apathy is Boring. Obviously folks know Tron New Cabinet, and there's a good group of others that allow members of community to get involved and push for change on specific issues. There's a group in Toronto called TTC Riders. They're focused on TTC and the transportation and making that equitable. So there's many groups where folks can get a part of, and come and knock on doors, come and sign a petition, come and speak to a committee or council about an issue. Like I think like biggest advice is get involved.
mhm,
Don't stay on the sidelines and at least try to do something, even if it's once a month. Like I think that is still meaningful, but at least try to do something civic related. Because not only does it help keep you engaged and informed, but it also does inspire other people when they see individuals like ourselves out there who are actually engaged in the issues that we are all facing. So I think I'd say those pieces, like for those who are in school, although my path of like I said, social advocacy and youth advocacy and engagement was not due to school. Like I have a lot of friends who were presidents of their student unions at universities and colleges, and who were part of their student unions and other like the Ghana Student Association or Black Students. So it's like I think join these type of groups and try to find leadership opportunities there too. And even if you don't want to be in a leadership role, just come out and volunteer or support or just show up. 'Cause I think that community building is so important towards our long-term success.
That's fair. I think people, if you're building with people, they'll want to go the long haul, like you said, with long-term success and want to continue to support you and be on board. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what are your next steps? Where do you see yourself? I know you're enjoying your crime shows right now, taking a break from the pressures, but where do you see yourself?
Yeah, I think right now I'm like I always say I'm rested when I'm not really resting, which I should be rested. I was talking to someone about that this weekend about really, prospering and rest and all these other aspects of my life. But I think right now, after I left my tenure, I've been doing a lot of consulting and government relations. So, like
Nice.
a couple of nonprofits and governments and cities have hired me and corporations have hired me to support them on some not just youth places, but also some campaigns that they're working on and initiatives. Like I'm still grounded in youth work though, so like a lot of youth engagement. I think beyond that, I my hope is to definitely go back to Ghana, not full time, but go definitely
Yeah.
go back to Ghana to see how I can contribute to some of that national development work there too. Like I said, for those who were not to call in the beginning, although I was born here, I went to school in Ghana for 3 years, and that experience did have a real impact on my life. And so I still talk to some of my peers from my school in Ghana too. And so if I can go back and contribute and support some of the work there and help, really build a capacity or empower individuals and support people, that's something that I'm really passionate about and I want to do. And I will do. So my plan is always, I think we all should go back to the motherland and contribute and help build Africa and Ghana. And I think like our young people there, obviously we know are bright, intelligent, but it goes back to access to opportunities, and so
Mhm.
which is why when I came here and I saw folks who looked like me were facing similar challenges there or racism, and it's like, well, how are we in a third world, like not third world, like a developed country
Mhm.
facing all these barriers? Like, what is this? Like, it's unacceptable. And I think that also fueled my fire of pushing for change. So that's really what I'm up to right now is somewhat of a rest. I'm studying for my LSAT too,
Oh,
for
nice.
law school next year. And
Oh, that's
yeah.
amazing. Congrats. That's exciting. I'm really glad to hear that. I was thinking about while I was trying to gather the questions. I was wondering, would he go back to Ghana after facing the stress in Toronto? How much more Ghana? Ghana definitely needs us. It's one thing that's on my mind, being able to create change there. But when you deal with the change or the frustrations here, it's just like, oh, there's some organized systems here that we need in Ghana that we don't have. I'm not sure if we're at that level yet, but I'm glad that's on your agenda. So hopefully in the next few years we'll see that.
Absolutely. No, I do agree. It's Ghana's probably its own different beast, but I
Mhm.
think there's always a way for all of us to contribute and make an impact, and so finding whatever that way looks like for us, and playing our part. Because I think we all have to play our part to make change, and if we can all play our small parts, be it small or big, I think it all goes towards making a meaningful impact.
That's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. Just one um, question that came to mind. It's a little bit off topic, but I'm just wondering how you've navigated challenges with people you didn't agree with but had to work with. Because when you said with Ghana, when we were talking about Ghana, that came to my mind again. I'm like, that will definitely happen there, happens here,
Yeah, challenges with people I did not agree with. I
or did
think
not agree with you.
Oh, did not agree with, yeah. I mean, I think I'll say like I'm big on obviously listening to people's like diverse opinions. Like I think that goes back to the polarization of our politics. No one wants to listen to each other, and so I think I like my first thing is, okay, like let me hear you out. Let me understand your point of view. Hopefully, you give me an opportunity to understand, like for you to understand my point of view. And it's about also finding common ground. Like I think, politically for the initiatives I've pushed for, especially this most recent youth employment one, and this in the stuff in the past, it was very polarized and it was very tense. Like it was a lot of challenges, which a lot can't be said, but I think it was never easy. But my approach was always, whether it was with a counselor or a staff or someone, it's like, how can we find a common ground toward on this issue, on this motion? Like you didn't like I'd say I wrote a motion that had like 20 recommendations, and you didn't like you didn't like half of them, or you didn't like 15 of them. It was just like, but it's like still gonna stand firm on my,
I'm
piece,
sorry.
but
Yeah.
I'm
Can you?
also going to be open to making changes. And I think like with all things politically, but also in life, there's compromises, there's
This
working
guy. Oh,
together,
oh, he
there's
has people in the car.
negotiation. And so
That's what we. I figured that's what you're supposed to do.
Sorry,
Come
give
to
me
the
one
next
moment.
one. Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah.
can you hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No worries. I think another piece about folks who I didn't agree with or disagree. Like I think ultimately though, it's stay strong in your values and morals, and because ultimately sometimes you can't find compromises. Sometimes you can't go on and find a middle ground, and I think that's okay. But for as long as you can say you gave it your best shot, that you tried to find a common ground, that you at least listen to the other person's perspective, I think that's important. Or the last thing too is I think respect, because ultimately, so oftentimes we, be it politically or not, we can take disagreements on an issue to be personal disagreements. Like it can be personal. Like, it's like I don't need to agree with you, but I can still like you and respect you. And I think the people I've worked with and the folks that I've engaged with, who had that mindset of, hey, Stephen, we know you have to advocate, we know you have to make our life difficult, but I'm not going to be mad at you because I know you have a role to play and you're doing that role. And I think I have tremendous respect for those people who understood that, who respected it, and who did not take it personally. But then, oftentimes you do have people who take things personally, unfortunately, and then it becomes very negative and toxic. But I think for me, I always try to once again, be positive, be nice, be respectful, and not make personal attacks, especially politically, and just focus on the issues. I think that goes to all as facets of society is like,
Mhm.
let's try not to be petty and like really focus on what's the disagreement and how can we find a solution to it.
That's great. I'm glad you said that because I think it matters with politics as people are discovering and learning other people's political views. And then also with just daily life in school, in
Yeah,
work, we will face these challenges and we need to be able to learn how to the see past the problem, see the person, but see the problem as something different, separate from our personal values or morals or things like that. So I'm glad that people were able to show you that respect that you deserve and let you do your work.
absolutely. Absolutely, and ultimately, you still have to work with these people, whether it's in a
Mhm,
workplace or a school space. Like you still have to coexist with
mhm.
people, and I don't mind awkward too much, but it's like no one wants to be in an awkward space with someone. It's like that's just cringe, but it's like
Yeah.
I think which goes back to the respect part, which is so important.
That's great. So thank you for answering that. I want to get pass the mic over to anyone else who wants to ask any questions to Stephen or share any comments. So you can type in the chat if you're too shy, I'll read out your question, or you can go ahead and unmute or raise your hand and then unmute and feel free to ask away. I'll just go through the chat and see if we have any hands up.
Evelyn, Ilya, I'm just reading the chat myself. It says, with the current job market, do you have any advice for the youth in our community on how they can build networks that could help with either finding a job or pursuing graduate school, etc., such as reference letters? Yeah, like thanks for the question. I think this reminds me of I know Emmanuel Dodu, Mr. Dodu is on this call from GCAO, the president, and when they had the town hall it was a month or two ago. I think there's a similar question was asked and I answered it, but I think my response then was, I believe we as a community, not just as yeah, like we as a community need to like have an important role to play because there's a lot of working professionals, there's a lot of us who are doing, you know, like we all work somewhere, we all do something, we all can utilize our own relationships to support our youth and support our children. I don't think there's many people who are doing that, be it us as individuals. I think there's a role for the church to play. Like I think all of us as Ghanaians have a role to play to support each other and to support our young people. And so like whether you're a Ghanaian who might be a nurse at sick kids, or might be a scientist here, or might be a policy person there, or a youth worker, or teacher, or whatever the case might be. I think we all have the ability to make connections, to connect people, to lift people up. And I think my motto is, as I like, and this it's saying in society, like you lift as you climb. Like if you're not bringing people forward and bringing people along the journey with you as you're rising, you're not doing the right thing. And so, I guess for that question more specifically, how can you build their networks and help finding a job? Well, if you're a young person lives in Toronto, the initiative we push for the 10,000 additional jobs, that is meant to do exactly what you just said, which is like, hey, like it's hard to get a job without experience, but you can't get experience without a job. It's that catch 22. And so we push the city to create a youth employment program to provide 10,000 additional jobs, not just for any youth. We prioritize Black, Indigenous youth, young people 15 to 24, young people who live in Toronto community housing, young people who live in our low income community. Like we have a strong criteria that's specifically for the young people who need these jobs. And the goal is with these jobs, it helps build their capacity, it helps them with references, and it helps them pursue a future of career success. So hopefully that answers the question. But I think in the meantime, for those who can't find a job or whatnot, I think it's like, hey, you know, guidance counselors and teachers are sometimes helpful. Like, it depends on your school, but I think also your youth workers and members of your community, like your community workers and your community, like they are also pretty helpful in helping young people make those connections. Reference letters, like I know I written a lot of letters for people, whether you worked with me a long time or didn't. It's just like, hey, if I can support you, I can support you. Like this summer. I worked with Toronto Community Housing, and I told them, hey, I have like a handful of young people who need jobs, and so I was able to get specifically with that organization like 5 kids jobs, a housing, just because of my relationship with the directors. Like, hey, I can hire these young ones. They are vulnerable. They need a job. They need an opportunity, and she did it. So, I think that's like very helpful, and it goes back to my point of we all have a role to play to stretch out our hands to support our young people.
That's awesome. And just I know she had just a follow-up question with
Volunteering
volunteering. Yeah.
and helping you pursue some goals and get you to where you are. Volunteering is so important. I love volunteering. I think when I first like I was in high school and got out of high school, I needed to start. I was told Steven stop doing too much volunteering, but I think volunteering is so important. Because although you might not be getting paid for it, you're still like one. You still like depends on where you volunteer, but like ultimately all volunteering is it's in one way or another is it's all service. It's all and you have an impact one way or another. And so for me, I volunteered a lot when I was young, and it was critical in not just pursuing my goals, but like I said, broaden my worldview, showing me different people's experiences. Help like I was already an empathetic person, but it helped strengthen my empathy and sympathy and my servitude. And so, but like career wise, like I always tell young people, like even if you can't get a job, that time you're spending not doing anything, go volunteer. Because that's gonna help look good on your resume, because at least shows that you did something and that you supported something. So yeah, volunteering was very critical and crucial, obviously with the way the economy is. And when you talk to young people, they're not trying to do that right now, and even adults are not trying to volunteer right now. But I do think if we can make once again, at least once a month, spend it volunteering for 2 hours, an hour, like that does go a long way. And I know when I was in high school and entering post-secondary, I volunteered like once, twice a week. Obviously, as the schedules get busy, like you gotta decrease, but I did that like once, twice a week, then I had to bring it down to twice a month. But I think it's so critical, and if we're able to volunteer, we should do it.
That's amazing. I agree. I think like it helps you actually do the job
Yeah,
and can not just speak on your resume, but speak in the interview. I did X, Y, Z, and that's why
exactly.
I am an important member of the community that can advocate for you and should be
Yeah.
elected. I think that would be a great. Mhm.
And exactly, I think lastly, by to this point, like many of like a good number of the folks who knew me when I started stuff, it was because of my volunteering. I was also like doing volunteering for United Way and whatnot, and like my volunteering had me go to like the big banks like BMO, RBC, TD. Like I was like it was volunteering for one of their campaigns. And so I would be in the rooms with all these vice presidents of these banks, and I'm here like I'm still in my teens, like I'm like a 18, 19 year old, but then I still have those connections to this day because they remember me as a young person who came out. And so I think it goes a long way. If I ever needed a bank job or something, but even not just a bank job, like these are people who have relationships. And so I think volunteering, you'll never know who you meet. And you'll never know where the person you meet then ends up going to or like being in life. And then, they can definitely be of support to you.
That's amazing. I'm glad you said that and have said so many gems. Is there maybe one or two more questions we can take before we wrap things up? Does anyone want to unmute and share anything? Any comments or any questions? I know Frank had said that this is a great conversation. Some young people don't want to have. I know we talked a lot about politics, but I just wanted to emphasize and get the opportunity to have Stephen share some of his thoughts so that we can be informed. And when something affects a young person, I think that's when they'll start to pay attention and realize, you know what, this is something I should look into. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we're able to go this deep. I don't think we have any more questions now. So I
Evelyn, I think it has her hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Evelyn. You go ahead. I'm just keeping an
Hi,
eye on.
Stephen. It is so great to meet you online. And I was at City Hall briefly, and it was such a proud moment just hearing like senior politicians speak about you. So
Oh,
this is a very touching moment. So
thank you
congrats.
very much. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. So thank
um,
you.
yeah, you're welcome. I'm wondering, as a Black Ghanaian individual, being in those very powerful spaces, where often you may have been the only Black person, even if there were other minorities, you may not have identify with or felt like they were part of your community, what helps you to sort of, I guess, maintain not feeling like an imposter and questioning whether or not you deserve to be in those spaces? Because I think some of us Ghanaian youth, it's something we may deal with. And at
Yeah.
times, it can even push you back from pursuing your goal, almost feeling like this goal is too big for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I think it's yeah, like I mean, being in spaces where you're not only the only Black person, but also the only young person. Like I think when I started this, it was something that like, I mean, even when I ended, it was the reality, but how I navigated it was obviously different. And I think when I started it, definitely it's one of those I guess I'll use the word nerve-wracking. Like sure, like obviously like who's won't be nervous, like you're entering a meeting, be it with a minister or a counselor or a division head or someone, and it's like, oh wow. I think Obama said this once where he was like the most people who are important like really don't know anything, or they're not really. You said something along those lines where you seen in an interview. But I think I share such an assessment where it's like no, no, those people, and I think really early in, those people stopped intimidating me. Oh, well, if I use the word intimidating, like I use that lightly, but it was nothing I really feared because one, I knew I deserved to be in the space. Especially when I became the executive director, I think it was obviously with a change in title, which also meant more responsibility and which also meant more access to certain spaces. I think my confidence would build from that. But even before that, like I was already in a lot of spaces when I was education lead for 2 years. I was already in meetings with individuals who would either typically tokenize young people or I was like, "Oh, Steven, great. We love to see young people doing great work." I'm like, I'm not here to just, play games. I'm actually here to have like this business to do. And so I think, and then they see that. Like I always look back, and it's unfortunate because not only are you getting this from folks who don't look like us, but you also do get some folks who do look like us. Like especially on my anti-black racism initiative, there's a couple of black organizations, won't name them, but they were not inclined to support like one of the letters I had written to the minister. And we got a lot of the big teacher unions in there. And for those who are in the education space, you know how important teacher unions are. And so we got a couple of the major teacher unions. We got some citywide provincial organizations, and we got the Ontario Human Rights Commission to also sign on to it, and they're like big. And so I remember one time we first approached, she was like, "Oh no, leave it to us to handle. We got this. We got this." I was like, "Okay." Then I went to get everyone else, and then like a week or two before I was gonna release a statement, I went back to them to give them an opportunity. I'm like, "Hey, just an update. I have all these people who sign on. If you don't want to be a part of it, no problem, but just letting you know." And they're like, "Oh no, please put our logo. Good job, kudos." And I'm just like, I just laughed, but I still put them on because I think once again, humility, but also recognizing the importance of different groups and different stakeholders. But that was an experience with Black folks, and I think I experienced that one, two times in my beginning before it became the point where folks knew better than to be like, "Oh, okay, when Steven's emailing you, it's like, oh, he's another just one of these young people who are just here to explore." It's like, no, he's gonna like he means business, and we're gonna actually have to get stuff done. And so I think for me it's really like being confident, but also doing the hard work and research. And like I think all of my initiatives, the amount of research I did on it, like I could confidently and can confidently speak almost so some of them back in front, obviously not every single thing of a topic, but I knew a lot to the point where I can hold my ground in a meeting. I can hold my ground in a conversation. And for those who've watched me, you've seen times where I'd be grilled by counselors in committee, like asking me various questions about things, but it's like I held my confidence because I knew what I was talking about. I know it reminds me of an experience of one of my colleagues, who's brown. He was like, he always asked me this. He's like, "Steven, like, how do you like do what you do?" And he was just so stunned, and he was referring to like how I speak on the media and how I spoke in meetings. And I think for him, I forgot my response, but I think my response is usually just like I get my confidence from the fact that I know what I'm saying is true and factual, but I also know that I'm here representing young people. Like I know my why, I know why I'm here. I think when I'm in meetings, when I'm in the news, or when I'm doing whatever, I know I don't just speak on behalf of myself. I speak on behalf of, all the people I represent. I think that also goes a long way, a long way, and gives me confidence. So for those of us who are in positions or whatnot, where we might have those imposter syndrome or unsure if we're, meant to be here or whatnot, I think it's reaffirming to yourself, no, I do deserve to be here. And even if I don't think I deserve to be here, I'm gonna make sure people know I deserve to be here and, make myself known. So I think that would be my advice to that is be hard, like do the work to make sure that you know you know what you talk about, that you're confident, that you are like a subject matter expert on what you need to do, but also just remember that you deserve to be here just like all those other people who got there because of friends and relationships. Meanwhile, you got there because you actually put in the hard work.
That's facts. I'm glad you say that. Put in the work, let the work speak for
Yeah.
yourself, and stay true to yourself and that confidence. So I'm gonna just we'll take 5 more minutes. I'll let Richie go ahead and ask his question and then wrap things up. So Richie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening, Steve. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm good, brother. How are you?
Not too bad. So, to be honest with you, I didn't like. I was always looking into how young people could get into this kind of the field that you were in to try and bridge the gap between the old people and the young one. Because I think if we amplify the young people's voice in there more, we'll get more of what is good for the young people of the country, of the city, or whatever. But I didn't know about your cabinet being there. And so the first time I saw you on the TV, I'm like, wait a minute, is that a fellow Ghanaian? And I was super proud. Like, bro, I was so proud hearing you talk. And then, so right now I'm asking this, is there an advice that you give to young people out there or young person out there who wants to get into such space? what would be the best advice you think you give to them? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for and thanks for the support and the encouragement. I appreciate that. I guess, so advice for young people want to enter this space. Like, I think it's really and similar to previous answer. Like, I think I'd really say, like, for me, like, it's so important to go into these spaces knowing what you're talking about, like, and making sure that you're informed. Because ultimately, like, I remember. Like there's been times where I'm a speaker at an event or whatever, and then I remember one time a person confused me as like he's like, "Hey, are you like one of the volunteers or like a cleaners or whatever?" I'm just like, "I'm in a suit. How am I a cleaner?" It's just like all these nonsense and foolishness, and so it's like, and then next thing you know, I'm on the stage, and then 20 minutes later, so it's like I think we're always gonna encounter moments as young people and as just Black folks where we're belittled, where people try to tokenize us, so on and so forth. But I think my advice to young people is be prepared and make sure that you yourself can confidently speak on what you're saying. I think another piece too is honestly, the reality is it does take time. You know, you can do all that work. I did all that work, the research. Like I did A, B, and C. I can tell you A, B, and C. And I did all the A, B, and C, but it still did take time. Not a long time, thankfully, but like obviously everyone's different. But it took time to get to a point where I said to myself, yeah, like I'm not gonna be uncomfortable or shy, or even if I do have that small shyness, you're not gonna see it. Like I'll be like you. I think that's another thing is putting on that I guess a game face. So it's like not showing people your not about not showing people your weakness, but at the end of the day, people already don't believe we deserve to be in these spaces. They don't believe that we're capable, and so we don't want to give them any reason to further doubt us or question our abilities. And so I think for young people too, when we are in spaces, I remember leading consultations with the city where some community organizations would be like, "Oh, you know, we're not sure." Not about me, but like in general, we're not sure about having young people here because we're afraid we're gonna tokenize them. I'm like, I remember one time I was in a meeting where someone said, "I'm just like, but that's the problem right there. You're afraid you're gonna tokenize young people, but then like just don't." It's like you as the adult like just don't do it. And so I think it's like it's always going to be an issue. I think it reiterates why young people, when we are in spaces, we need to speak up, we need to be bold, we need to be confident, and it goes back to how am I gonna be bold and confident is putting in the hard work, making sure I'm informed, and making sure that I don't know, pray. Like I think it's just you do have to build that internal confidence and hype yourself up first, and then when you enter these meetings, the rest naturally comes. Start building confidence right from early stages, and it'll be part of you. Absolutely, I think that goes back to my point of if you have a chance to volunteer, and if you have a like, which is why I always encourage young people to volunteer or get involved in their community one way or another. Because the more you put yourself in different spaces, the better. And by the time you do end up being in a leadership role, you have that confidence. Like just this week, Monday, I held a youth homelessness summit at Toronto City Hall, and we brought together over 100 young people experiencing homelessness and about 50 plus stakeholders. And one young person who has come to my events in the past, like a lot of times, he came up to me like, "Steven, like I feel like I'm ready." Because every time he comes and speaks. I always have him speak. If he wants to, but I always encourage him and he speaks. And like this Monday, he's like, "Nah, I don't want to sit in my chair. I want to come to the front." And like he came to the front and like spoke on the podium and like and so then after the event he came up to me saying like I feel like I'm ready for the next step, like I want to take a leadership role. And so I think it starts early. It starts with those small moments of speaking out in different events, showing up to different spaces itself is a confidence builder, then speaking up, and then it gets to a point where you have that leadership ability. So I think it does take time, but I look at this young person I'm talking about, like within like 4 or 5 events, like within a year, and then he's already ready to like he said forward for like I want to take your role, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's like how do we, instill that confidence early. So hopefully that answers that question. Like I think it's a process. It takes time, but like I think the one big thing I said already is like young people need to make sure you're informed because I've been in meetings with other folks where young people are present and it's not your average young people, it's young people who say they're representing other groups. And it's just like you don't know what you're talking about though. So like and it makes us as young people look bad because then people think, oh, these all these young people are the same, they're just here to talk rubbish. When it's like no, some of us actually are here to talk the reals. And so I think being informed is so important too.
That's amazing. I'm glad you say that. Like you
Mm.
said before, confidence is important. Knowing your why, knowing that you have a mission, you have values that are important to you, and God qualifies you. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is with David when he came to Goliath and he said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" Like he doesn't know I fight with bears. Like we need to know who we are, what God has
Yeah.
instilled in us. You prayed for God to give you that 4-point plan, and He downloaded the blueprint for you when you were able to create change instantly. So we need to trust in the gifts that God has given us and put ourselves out there because, they say faith without works is dead. We need to combine our prayer with our works and God will make a way. So,
Unequivocally, prayer and faith has been my guide in all that I've done. I've said that publicly on the news before too, and when I'm getting awards, I'm like, it's always been because of Jesus. And every initiative, everything I do, started with prayer, and then let God do the rest. And it always works out at the end of the day. So I think always have confidence in Him.
amen. Yes, everything will work out for the good of those who love Him. So, thank you, Stephen, for sharing such nuggets, for inspiring us all. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, getting to talk to you. I'm really grateful to see what more is in store for you. So, everyone, please share your feedback. We've posted some links in the chat, so please let us know how we can improve, how we can continue to